Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are doing the video for Daf Samekh Bet, page 62 of Masechet Avodah Zarah for Daf Shevui. This Daf begins a new parak, and all new prakim, of course, begin with a new Mishnah. The Mishnah here is related, though, to the Mishnah at the end of Parak Daled, and indeed Parak Daled and Parak Hey are really one unit. The Mishnah discusses a non-Jew who hires a Jew to work with him to make yain nesech, and the question is are the worker's wages prohibited because the thing that he's working with is prohibited? We should note that this is a relevant issue for many other things where Jews are employed to work in places that don't keep kosher or are engaged in not immoral practices, that would be wrong, of course, but in receive wages for doing things that Jews are not allowed to derive benefit from or not allowed to eat. I'm not going to get into all of the halachot about that, but they are relevant to this sugya, to this passage. The Mishnah tries to find three reasons. The Gemara tries to find three reasons why this should be prohibited. The first is that yain nesech is asur b'hana'ah. It is prohibited to derive any benefit from yain nesech, and therefore the rules are more strict as opposed to other substances where it's only prohibited to eat, in which case a Jew could derive benefit. In a sense, a Jew working with yain nesech is deriving benefit from yain nesech, and therefore his wages should be prohibited. But the Gemara rejects that because there are other things where the proceeds accrued through the sale of objects from which one may not derive a benefit are still permitted. So just because something is prohibited b'hana'ah, meaning one cannot derive benefit from it, does not mean that the proceeds from it automatically have the same status. The next case is that yain nesech is tofeset damav like shvi'it, meaning if you sell yain nesech, not just any proceeds, but if you sell yain nesech, the proceeds from it, the money that is used to purchase yain nesech, is prohibited. And so maybe we should look at working with yain nesech as if it was selling yain nesech, and selling yain nesech is not only prohibited, but the proceeds are prohibited. But the Gemara rejects that too, because the same thing with shvi'it, it's a long and a little bit of a complicated sugya, but just because the proceeds of selling shvi'it are prohibited does not mean that working with shvi'it is necessary. The wages are prohibited. And so finally we end with what seems to be the most simple answers. It's simply a penalty. The proceeds the wages are not really technically Avodah Zarah wages. They don't have the status of Avodah Zarah, but they're still prohibited because the rabbis did not want Jews working with yain nesech. It may be part of this whole overall attempt to keep Jews from assimilating, at least in certain ways, with non-Jews. And we should note that in many cases, when we have stories that follow long abstract discussions, the stories are far more lenient than are the abstract discussions, but not in this case. In this case, the story is actually just as strict, maybe even more strict. He tells them to bury it and scatter it and burn it and bury it. Burn it and bury it. The proceeds, the wheat that a certain Jew gets from renting out his boat to be used with Avodah Zarah. So a boat to be used to bringing yain nesech, it's interesting that the stories are so much more strict, or at least as strict as the abstract halakha. That in itself is a testimony, I believe, to how strictly the rabbis viewed the rules of yain nesech.